Welcome to Ongoing Changes, where mind, body and spirit meet science. Today, I have the pleasure of having Phillip.
Hello, Beatriz.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Excellent. And what we'd like to discuss today is wellness in a space of healing, or have we become a space of wellness where everything is regulated? So most industries have to follow a typical cookie cutter like ABC in order for you to be able to not only service people but work with people for the highest well-being. Now, as the podcast says, it's all about ongoing changes. And let me tell you, this podcast is none the difference. I have Phillip with me, who has gone from a financial sector into the wellness sector. So don't let me tell you about Phillip. Let's welcome Phillip to tell us about Phillip.
Thank you, Beatriz. So, as you mentioned, I did work in the financial services sector years ago. And obviously such a massive change from financial services to
Huge.
the mental health. And people often ask the question, how come from the world of numbers to the world of psychology and psyche? And I'm a strong believer that life leaves clues. And even though when I worked in the financial services sector, I was always curious about human psychology, and behavioral finance, for example, is a thing which is used a fair bit in the financial world, in investing, also to a great extent in sales.
It's interesting because when I think of finances, it's all about the bottom dollar. If I go to a financial advisor, I've got X amount of money, yes. What can I do with it? It's not about what the person feels or anything. It's about give me numbers.
Yeah. So the different types of financial advice. So you obviously have the cookie cutter sort of financial advice, but then you also have the holistic side of financial advice. It's similar to mental health, right? So you have the cookie cutter approach to mental health, which you are talking about. And then there is a more holistic side to mental health beyond pure medication only. Something that goes deeper into the human psyche. That's something that looks not only at the body, but also the social constructs. Looks at the constructs involving other aspects, such as perhaps the individual's sense of being as a whole. Coming back to your question, so from financial services to the mental health space, there was a moment in my career wherein I myself experienced nearing a state of depression. And that to a great extent was an impetus for me to self-advocate for myself.
Right. Do you think that was, sorry to catch up, do you think you were getting to the burnout stage, or were you disillusioned with the industry? Like, where were you coming from?
I would say there are multiple factors in play.
Okay.
Having worked as a financial advisor myself and then very actively involved in the compliance and policy side of things during the Banking Royal Commission, yes, there definitely was a sense of disappointment with the system.
Why?
Because you end up just working for the dollar.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of people to this day, perhaps, and a lot of sectors do that. And, it's a very common saying in Australia, another day, another dollar.
Yeah, yes.
And that's the culture. Well, it's good if it works for you, but it wasn't the case for me. Fortunately, I also had friends who worked in the mental health space, and we would have these amazing conversations about psychology, consciousness, the nature of reality, and so on. And one day, a friend told me, "Hey, Phil, why don't you look at the mental health space? We need people like you." And I was surprised. I was like, really? Me? Like, I work in the financial services sector. You need people like me? But that was, again, the mask perhaps talking.
Right. So when you were doing finance as part of school, did you do any kind of counselling or psychology as part of your...
So a lot of your engagements when you talk to a client from a financial perspective, because what I did was holistic financial advice. So we just don't talk to the individual about dollars and numbers. We talk to them about their legacy. What is it that they want to leave for their kids?
Oh, right.
And when you talk about things of that nature, stories come up. Stories that cut, stories that basically show you a side of an individual, which normally they wouldn't have expected to bring up in a conversation with a financial advisor.
That's very true, because like I was saying, if I've got X amount of money, I want to do something with it. So I would not expect to have the conversation in, what are you going to leave your kids? Well, if I don't spend it all, they can have some.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because most of my clients, when I was a financial advisor, thanked me not for sorting out their investments. And I actually did pride myself in that aspect of my job. But, I would often have clients come up to me, Phil, thank you for having that chat with my son. We can now talk. He's now listening.
Oh, right. So was it kind of a more normal conversation that you would have? Like, would it be an in-depth kind of a conversation? Would it be a financial? I mean, what kind of a conversation would you have for getting thanked by the parents?
Yeah, I think so. First thing first, you got to talk to people like human beings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I still remember a story wherein I got gone to see this client at 8 p.m. and he basically wasn't in the best frame of mind and just needed someone to talk to. It turned out that this poor guy, his wife had left him and caravanning with another man.
Right.
Okay.
Difficult
situations. A strong indication of the need for something missing, loneliness, a void. And often conversations of that nature would start at a personal level. And from there on, the trust would be built, because they would see value in what is being communicated. They would seek a sort of support, even if it was something as simple as organizing for them to, go and watch a footy game with their kid, sending free tickets.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So,
because some cultures are very much in, I want to get to know you, I want to get to know the person, what kind of a person you are, what belief systems you have before I do any business.
Yeah. And I feel that is very true. As human beings, we are also tribal.
Yes.
For whatever reason, right? I have struggled with that to a great extent, and it still continues to be a bit of a struggle for me. Because in mental health, for example, I come from a different sector. At the start, when I was engaging in the space, my co-workers, they obviously never looked up to me. At least you get that sense, this person is different. They're not come from the world of advocacy and activism. What would they know?
Right. So were they younger than you or about the same age? Because a lot of our life experiences forge who we are and how we interact with people and what kind of a conversation that we engage in. It's because of, everything, our programming when we were young and everything else from then until now.
Well, I think so. It's multiple factors. I think so. A lot of the people I did work with are of a younger age. So there's definitely a gap in life experience. I think so. A lot of mental health tends to have the strong focus on lived experience, which is a beautiful thing. When the individual pertaining to that particular lived experience has worked on themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
But when you combine that along with life experience, the way of the world, that's where you really begin to form a good foundation of how to engage in a healthy manner, how to engage through connection rather than engaging constantly through activism that is filled with violence.
Yes. Yes, many things come under I'm an activist, but I'm a peaceful activist. And you think, you may be, but some of the people you work with may not be.
Yeah.
So having had such a different background, do you think that regulations have followed you? Like, are you free to engage with your clients how you want, or is there a particular, as you said before, a cookie cutter that you have to abide by, and time frames and time limitations?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. So I also run a private practice, so that's a different story than what I do on that front, which is a bit more holistic. But I also work for an organization. The mental health system in Australia, unfortunately, is still a very strongly medical driven approach. So while there is that psychosocial aspect of support that can be made available, the overarching lens for mental health is still strongly reliant on the medical system. Say, for example, someone's having an experience of mental health, extreme anxiety, 000. 000 takes you to the E-Day. E-Day gets you away to a hospital. In the hospital, what happens? You're medicated. You're medicated straight away, or basically you're looked upon as an individual that needs to be risk managed.
But I mean, they're risk managed so that they don't hurt themselves, but others don't get hurt as well. Now, all these stems from DSM.
Yes.
So is it the Digital Statistical Manual Diagnostic
Statistical Manual, yes.
Thank you, yes. That started back in 1952.
Yes.
Right? And Hans Seeley was the one that in 1930s came up with the word stress.
Yeah.
And then, but we also need a common language. So when I talk to someone that they're stressed or they've got anxiety, we've got a common language without having to go through the basics. This is what you feel in your body and everything else. But when the DSM was created, I believe that it was created in such a way to equate a diagnostics to a chemical, action that went with it.
Yes.
If you're doing this, we'll medicate you so that, again, you don't hurt yourself, you don't hurt others. But we've seemed to have been relying on it. And I think everybody's been taught that this is the magic pill.
Yes.
And therefore that'll cure everything. And do you find that even when people come, either through an intervention order or because they're actually part of the practice, that they have particular expectations or how the process should be done?
It depends on every individual. Every individual is different.
Right.
Sometimes people who've never been exposed to the system have no other option but to rely on it as a means to be healed or recover from whatever it be. Unfortunately, that often ends up being a bit of a rabbit hole because medication to a great extent has its role to play.
Yes.
Okay. But that being said, medication alone by itself is not a solution. And the reason why I say that is often you find people who will be medicated for ABC, but then they end up getting other physical symptoms which are more deleterious to their physical health.
Yes.
Okay. And at the same time, the actual reason for being medicated, say if it's a mental health challenge, is really not addressed to 100% efficacy. So you're still basically now not only with a mental health issue, but now it becomes a dual diagnosis issue of your physical health too.
Right.
A good example is the use of the drug clozapine, which is used a fair bit in schizophrenia and psychosis and so on. And that drug basically tends to have a significant impact on an individual's heart.
Well,
But also, if the individual misses a dosage 3 days in a row, they have to be re-titrated because it can cause a heart attack.
wow.
Now, what kind of dependent life is that to live? That's my question, right? So people get stuck in the system. And to your point about the DSM, yes, the DSM unfortunately is still to this date used as a means to diagnose people based upon the judgment of another person, right? So I may look at something, I may have a different judgment. Another psychiatrist may look at something and may have a different judgment.
Of course.
Yeah. But let's keep in mind, I think so it was very well into the 80s that being gay was part and parcel in the DSM.
Yes.
Yeah. As a mental health issue.
Correct.
Okay. Now, what is to say, okay, another 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, having psychosis or depression or anxiety should not be a part and parcel of that manual. And hopefully there's nothing in it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think that wasn't masturbation also one
Yes.
of those psychoses that people removed. Now, in the 70s, I think there was about 170 different ailments, and it was basically related to adults.
Yes.
And then as time progressed, the following one doubled, and then kids came into it.
Yeah.
So there's been a progression of how DSM has evolved. And to begin with, DSM was, they didn't actually believe in it that much because it didn't have any scientific basis. Because how do you check
Yes.
that there is a mental illness? I mean, if we want to test a drug, we go through and we do clinical trials on people of particular age ranges with these symptoms, and we try this drug and we see what the outcome is. But how do you do that with a mental illness?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a little bit ironic because there's this high level of cognitive dissonance in the very fact of diagnosing someone with ABC mental health issue. Now, that does not say that mental health does not exist.
Correct.
It does exist, you know. But the question here is the DSM being used as a means, as a foundation for the pharmaceutical industry just to pump drugs into people that technically do not improve their lives, if not make them better.
Yeah. And I understand that it's a double-edged sword, because a lot of people need the drugs in order to get out of depression. But some people are depressed, and taking the appropriate drug makes no difference. I mean, I've been depressed. I know what it's like to be depressed. But I took nothing. I chose to work with my head and put one foot in front of the other and mechanically get myself out of it.
Yes.
So do you think that we've forgotten how good we can be?
I think so. We need to return to the wisdom of the body. And, you know, this is where something like anthroposophy can be very helpful in returning to the wisdom of the body. And the antidote to a lot of our situations in life in general resides in the situation. You need to look around The answer is within. You know the answer. Of course, people do require support in terms of enabling them to bring that awareness about themselves. The challenge which I see with a lot of medication-based practices is that it is my way or the highway. Yeah. There isn't an open mind to look beyond what's new on offering. There isn't an open mind to look at things from the perspective of the individual having the experience rather than the experience being defined by the practitioner with a pre-packaged solution for them.
Okay. So you're talking about a psychotic episode, or are you talking about...
I'm talking about mental health in general.
Okay.
Even psychotic episodes, right? I mean, when they do happen, most likely the individual is taken to the process of getting them to realize that that is not reality. But how arrogant can we be? Because if you look at it from a quantum physics perspective, we cannot really pinpoint and say what is real and what isn't real.
Exactly.
Right? So to be that confident and tell someone that is not your reality is not only unvalidating, but also creates this polarity of difference.
Yeah.
Rather than engaging the person through their experience. Okay, what was your psychotic experience? Let's get into it. Right? Let's perhaps segment aspects of it where the energetic feel of that psychosis which you experienced has a strong sensation in your body.
Right. So you'd be taking it back to the body.
I would be taking it back to the body, but more importantly, it's not me taking it back to the body. It's letting the client guide me where their healing is. And that can be a lifelong journey for some people. That can be a process wherein the neuroplasticity of the brain kicks in and it starts connecting the dots itself.
Yep.
And that's where things like art therapy can be very helpful, movement therapy, balancing the right and left hemispheres. So starting to look at things from a holistic perspective, with medication perhaps having its role to play, but not the be-all.
Yeah, you kind of get stuck. I mean, you were talking about psychosis. Wasn't it David Lang who had the house? And he believed that any kind of schizophrenic, those that went through a schizophrenic episode was more of a shamanic movement, that you went from being this to being something else. And therefore it's like what, the Indians of the past would send their kids out with nothing but a bow and arrow and off you go and survive. So for him, it was very much also the thing that a psychotic episode was like, a movement from one realm to the other, but becoming a different person or a different reality that you walked into.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, a lot of cultures held in high regards people of that nature. They were considered as individuals with that alternate sense of reality.
The shamans.
The shamans, right? It is a little bit tricky to talk about things of those nature in Western culture.
Yes.
And even though Western culture in itself, if you look at anthroposophy, for example, has its lineage in terms of explaining psychosis and things along those lines, where, Rudolf Steiner, he talks a lot about, the astral body, the etheric bodies, the soul, the function of the soul, with respect to its capacity of thinking, feeling, and willing, and feeling being that capacity that modulates willing and thinking, right? So it is a soul-based experience, and perhaps something deeper that is happening, wherein there is a spiritual connection of the soul directly to something of a higher realm, but unable to integrate that faculty into the I, or as Jung said, the self.
Is that the higher self or the lower self?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah. I mean, it depends on how we look at it. So, because the soul basically has a world of polarity. And when we talk about I, even on the physical plane, we have a polarity. This is a world of polarity in which we live in.
Yes.
So I personally tend to look at it from a perspective of how does it serve the human being?
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
More tangible.
So that's right. When an individual has a sense of attachment, you could consider that to be the lower self. So a lot of trauma, there's a sense of attachment. But on the other hand, when an individual has a sense of detachment to an experience, but this experience is still there, right? So there's that flow that's still happening in tangible reality. The awareness is still there.
Yeah.
I perhaps would categorize that as the higher self.
Okay, so you're doing further studies at the moment, aren't you?
That's right.
How are you finding what you're learning, trying to incorporate it into your current role? Is it easy to implement? Are you finding that it makes it difficult because of the expectations or the regulations that you're currently working under?
It definitely does make it tricky because there is a line to toe. And what I always try and do is foster curiosity in an individual. That is the first step. If we can foster curiosity in the individual, that automatically guides them. So in process-oriented psychology, there is a concept of the meta-communicator. And the meta-communicator basically is very much like the detached observer.
So is that what you are?
That's right.
Right.
So when you talk to people, it's about asking questions that stimulate that deeper faculty within them. And this can often be tricky because when an individual is in a system, they often tend to be overly reliant on the system. I take this pill, I get a solution. I take this pill, I get a solution. Then comes a point where you take the pill and you're not getting the solution. Yeah? And that in many ways can be used as an opportunity to foster curiosity. Curiosity can be fostered through various ways. You can do art therapy, you can do yoga, you can do mindfulness, you can do eurythmy. And once people start engaging in these practices, right, they start noticing subtle shifts. And that is the beginning of the beginner's mind to healing.
Yeah. I think that because I've done transpersonal counseling, right? And it was always about the person needs to be in a certain state of awareness or readiness in order for them to be able to proceed. Because otherwise you've got the ego that comes in and it's like the shield. It's like, you're not getting in.
Yes.
Like, I'm too fearful of what happens if I allow, the thought of what happened, or not so much the thought of what happened, but what it felt like and how I can work through it.
Yes.
Because we're very much taught from a young age that how we control through fear and through guilt. They're the most things that we're taught as a young, if you don't behave and you're not quiet, then, we won't take you out for dinner, or you won't be able to go and have a play date with your friends.
Yes.
So therefore it's always been about control. So do you think that by engaging them, because it sounds like they're almost being engaged as a child, the curiosity, the 7-year-old or the 5-year-old, where the world is amazing, everything is new, and, you want to touch everything and you want to smell things, like smelling books, and so that you can be part of the world, but you're not scared of being, because kids play. Kids have got that innate, wonder what's going to happen if I try this.
Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. There's no doubt about it. And fostering curiosity is the key, in my opinion, to a lot. Give you an example of a client with ASD, very intellectual, in my opinion. Has a job but struggles to meet their KPIs because they're a perfectionist.
He is, or they are?
He is.
Right. Okay.
And as a part and parcel of that experience which was shared with me, I got to know a bit more about the other side of the individual, their love for philosophy, and so on. And he started talking about it. Amazing. And for some reason, through that conversation, which was fostered through my curiosity,
yes,
now there was a field of curiosity that developed in the individual to learn a bit more about mandalas.
Yes, the 3 levels of consciousness.
That's right. And I sat with this individual and we spoke about different shapes and how different shapes can represent different facets of life. For example, the circle or the dot. They all have a philosophical significance. And I asked this individual after that, so these are all these shapes out here, and I gave him a bit of a description of, what does ABC mean? How about you make your own mandala with these basic shapes? And he got started.
Wow.
And as he got started, he started to realize that as he was drawing the triangles, they weren't symmetric, the circles weren't perfect, and that perfection was kicking in. And he took time, and he colored them all. And after that, he turns around and tells me, you know what? Even though the shapes were not perfect, even the triangles weren't symmetric, even though, I would have preferred things to be a little bit more, in line. But when I look at this mandala as a whole, there's beauty in it. And I do not see those so-called imperfections.
Ah.
Now, that is neuroplasticity kicking in through an act
Absolutely.
and meaning, which can be conveyed and transmuted, not only transferred, I'm going to use the word transmuted to life and its workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And the fact that he understood it
Yes.
because he did it, so it became a meditation while he was doing it.
That's right.
Single point focus.
Yes.
And therefore the mind was able to make those new neurological connections and give him that aha moment back to the heart where
Yes.
it's okay.
Yeah. So I'm not saying it is a one and done and the person is healed.
Oh, of course not.
I don't know. Maybe he is. I don't know. Yeah. But it is the start of something. Right? It is the start of something new. The beginning, the creation
Yeah,
of something different.
yeah, that's
That gives
amazing.
meaning to an individual.
Yes, because the problem is when our locus of control is external, and the only thing that we can control, as we know, is the internal stuff. Everything in the outside world has to be according to A, B, and C, because anything else means that they're out of control.
Yeah.
It's like people who are bulimic or people that are anorexic. I've spoken to many people, and the fact was that the only thing they could control in their world was what went into their mouth.
Yeah.
And so therefore, that was the way of telling the rest of the world to back off.
Yeah. Absolutely. 100%. That's
And
true.
but it's always been treated as a mental illness. I mean, yes, it is a mental illness because people are so fixated, but they don't seem to get to the root of the cause as to what triggered that ailment. It just becomes an ailment.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, I remember when I got depressed, it was through my own choices of what I had chosen to do that led me down this path.
Yeah.
Now, instead of feeling sorry for myself and thinking, oh, you know, life is so hard and everything else, it's a matter of saying, hang on a minute, well, that was an interesting experience. Now, what do I want to get out of it?
Yeah.
And would I want to do it again? No. It's a definite no, because it's just too hard. But you sometimes need that hand up that allows you to open your eyes and think that, you know, if we lose a loved one, it's the selfishness of us not having that person there anymore. It's not the fact they're dead, because, hey, they feel nothing anymore.
Yeah.
They're in, as they say, seventh heaven.
Yeah.
And if we, well, I believe that I can talk to, you know, people that have gone past. Is that my imagination, or is it that we kick into a different realm that allows our frequencies to align and to be able to have those conversations?
That's a good question. And, you know, I strongly believe that engagement with the higher worlds is a beautiful thing, but individuals do need to have a strong psychological foundation
Yes.
before engaging in a lot of those things. And I often see a lot of Westerners, unfortunately, you know, going to India and going to the East and getting, you know, the third eye activation and Kundalini experiences and things along those lines, which just end up being a superficial experience, but also they do a lot of harm to themselves. And I say that they do a lot of harm to themselves is because then they come back, because you got to live in your real tangible world, right? and they lose their basic faculties of lifestyle. Now, what kind of life is that?
It's interesting because, as you know, David R. Hawkins, who's been long dead, he had one of those experiences when he was quite young as a teenager. And although he didn't say that it was a death experience, it must have been, because he said the only reason why he came back was because he could feel the anguish of his father when he found him in a mound of snow. And he found it very difficult to be part of the real world, because he said, once you've experienced, call it nirvana or whatever else, is that you're one with spirit. Is that you don't care about anything. I mean, why would you want to leave a place that's full of love and ecstasy to nourish a body and to play the game? When you can feel this amazing euphoria all the time.
Yeah. Speaking from an anthroposophical perspective, I believe that's where the role of the soul kicks in. So, there is an aspect of you choosing your destiny, but then there's also an aspect of free will and choice. And that's the game of duality. So when we come on Earth, we obviously potentially, and I'm saying potentially because I cannot pinpoint and say this is the case, but a lot of cultures, a lot of religious scriptures, a lot of books do indicate towards this concept of, having a predetermined reason to come on Earth so you can grow and you can learn. And through that process of learning, you're also given the choice, the tool of free will.
Yes.
And when you steer away from your, whatever path be, that's where things happen, right? Situations are created. And part and parcel of that experience, once again, then you get a choice to make use of that free will to navigate that situation so you can continue along the journey. So it does require a bit black and white thinking out here, but is it really black and white? Perhaps not. It's just that we are framing it in a very black and white manner, so our cognitive faculties can understand the vastness of the topic.
Yeah. Okay. I never used to believe in destiny, but as time has progressed, I kind of believe in destiny, that we come here for a particular reason, as you said, to learn something or whatever else. But we're taught how to be dual thinking, because everything is about black and white. Everything is about, all right, if you go down the path, what's the cause and event or the cause and effect? Like engineering is typical, we used to create these spreadsheets, like you had all these possibilities and what the probability was if that happened, and everything was about what ifs. So as we were talking about, all these black and white and this duality, do you think from a cultural perspective, we're actually, it's like adding fuel to the fire? Because I think that everybody talks about culture. If you come from this culture, it's like the DSM to me.
Yep.
If you come from this culture, therefore it's X, Y, and Z. If you come from this one, it's different. And if you come from this one, again, it's different. As we all part of this world. We didn't just become sea monkeys that someone added water and all of a sudden we were here. We all belong to the planet. We're all responsible for the planet, but we keep being divided either from a cultural perspective, from a language perspective, the words that we use. There just seems to be this huge divide. Do you see that in the people that you see, or how you talk to them, or how do you bring it together?
Well, I think the first thing first, it's necessary to acknowledge, I feel like the physical plane in which we live, that is the realm of duality.
Yes.
Right? Because as we were talking about the soul earlier, and in the purpose of the soul to grow and learn, there is destiny, but there's also, this free will associated with our being as a whole. And if I tend to look at duality as such is necessary for the soul to play out its high purpose.
What do you mean? Elaborate on it, please.
So if there was oneness on this plane, everyone would be happy.
Yeah.
Life would be, all good. But the fact that there is duality, it gives people a choice. And that's where the free will of the individual kicks in to navigate the situation with the hope of learning something and growing towards its ultimate destiny. Now, coming back to your point of the aspect of this extreme sense of duality which we create in everything, this us versus them, in culture, in places, in situations, there is definitely something too much of it.
Yes.
That can fry the circuits of the soul, if I may say so. And maybe that's the reason why we are seeing so many people with ADHD and young kids and ASD and so on.
Not vaccine.
Yeah. Maybe there is a reason to that.
Yeah.
Right? This extreme sense of polarity that we are creating. But
do you think it's the polarity that we're creating, or are they coming in as mirrors to what we've created in order to get us back into some sort of alignment?
I say everything is interconnected. So absolutely. We create polarity, but then at the same time, there's the other aspect wherein that interconnectedness is working in a way to balance things. So while we are the observers, the so-called observed is also observing us.
Yes.
Right. But in this entire game, if you look at it from a holistic societal perspective, this is where things get tricky, and the human darkness, the darkness of the soul that can often be projected onto society and the people that live within it, comes back to that point of control that you are talking about. And we create this us versus them. It is often done in a way to gain some sort of control, either of another or of a faculty within ourselves that we're insecure of.
Yes.
But when you look at it from a worldview perspective, there are people who call the shots.
Oh,
Yes. And if we had to move towards this worldview of oneness and unity, and then we have had people and systems in place to a great extent that have reaped the benefits of this polarity, of this creation of us versus them. it is only obvious that there would be resistance to change. Because why would someone want to give up? Especially when a lot of people have forgotten to work on themselves first before taking the step to pass a judgment about the other.
Yeah. Really, the biggest poison, I think, in any working environment is when people gossip. Because it just creates, it's like a festering sore that can never heal. So therefore you never know, who's being honest with you or who truly wants to help you. Or do they want to help you so they can stab you in the back? But from a cultural perspective, we've come here and there seems to be an overextension or the ability to help others because we believe are underprivileged or they've been hard done by.
Yep.
So therefore, our polarity seems to go too much in one direction or too much in the other. There doesn't seem to be that fine balance like a matriarchal society or a patriarchal society.
Yeah.
When we come to that balance, it's much better. So instead of trying to oppress or change that what we don't understand, aren't we much better off of embracing it? Like the Aboriginal culture, they've got their dreaming and they talk about their dreaming and going walkabouts. And they used to nurture and nourish this land. Now, Jung also talked about the dreams and how important they are. Like they're our subconscious. We're all linked. I mean, how can two people across the world have the same idea almost at the same time?
Yeah, that's true.
Right? How can that be if we're not connected?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, there's a lot of recent research by a gentleman called Rupert Sheldrake, and he's got this theory of morphic fields, where he talks about something very much similar to, what a lot of cultures have been indicating, that we are communicating, but we don't only communicate verbally, but also we are communicating at a deeper level through nature. The trees are communicating. We don't realize that. The weather is communicating to the trees and vice versa, and we don't acknowledge that. Of course, this is a very recent science, so obviously there's a lot of resistance.
There is.
To the concept of the capacity for nature to engage in this beautiful way and human beings to engage in this beautiful way. That is not visible, that is not tangible, yet we do it.
But I don't know, there seems to be a lot of trials and, science has proven time and time again that trees resonate at a frequency, we resonate at a frequency. Everything is tangible. You can actually quantify it and qualify it.
Yes.
It's not like it's magic.
Yeah.
It's like all the different kinds of engineering. You've got electrical and you've got instrumental and you've got mechanical. Well, most of them don't trust electrical because they can't see it. It's like you guys do all this voodoo magic and things work, but we can't see anything. But we don't question it anymore.
Yes.
We go over and we flick a switch.
Yes.
And we know the light's going to come on.
Yes.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
Because we know there is something there.
Yeah.
So what's the difference of the other things that we cannot see?
There's no difference. I think so it comes down to control. And I hate to say this, that sometimes there is this sense that society is being driven along a certain path, and the deeper faculties of human beings, such as the capacity to engage with spirit or to engage with an embodied sense, these are being dumbed down for whatever reason. Perhaps so that one day, we may all have a chip in our head and voila,
Like, oh yeah, I know what I'm saying there.
Yeah. So the intellect of human being is being challenged. Especially if you look at the last 5 years. If you ask me, in the last 5 years, with COVID was a fantastic example of mass psychosis.
Yes, it was definitely very interesting.
Yeah. And when I say mass psychosis, aside, COVID as a whole and, the actual virus, if we just look at human psychology and how people were behaving.
Yes.
Right? Something as simple as toilet paper became a precious item. That is psychosis.
Oh, absolutely. Like that was wild. It was beyond, like nobody needed toilet paper to survive. But we've been conditioned, because that's all it is. It's conditioning that we must have this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're being, you're being dirty, or, you wouldn't use your hand and soap and water. Like, that would be way too much. But I think we've been conditioned for everything we do. Buying clothes and buying particular bits of clothes and going to particular restaurants, being seen with particular people in order to escalate. But the one that most people found it the hardest, I don't know about the people that you came across, were the people that lived by themselves and they had to be by themselves. Yeah. They had to confront who they were because they had no idea who they were.
Yeah. Absolutely, 100%. And that's part and parcel, of so many people, not only confronting themselves, but, family is the basic unit of society. And to a great extent, a lot of families had forgotten how to sit at the table and eat, right? Let alone squabble at the table. And something like COVID all of a sudden threw that upon people, wherein now, brothers and sisters or parents and children who, never sat at the table to have a meal or did so after a very super duper long time, had to sit, talk, engage.
Yeah.
Right. I think so. The divorce rates literally skyrocketed after COVID. Don't quote me on that statistic, but I do remember reading an article about it. And these are people we consider intimate in our life. And the fact that we were placed in front of each other as mirrors in many ways.
Thrown in together.
That's right. Constantly. 24/7.
Yeah, that's very true.
There's a strain on human psyche.
It's very interesting because at the time I was living with my son and we get on really well. Like, we go overseas together and it wasn't, there was nothing wrong with it. We still, we had fun, we ate meals together, we still chatted. I remember when they were in grade 5, I cut the cable to the television, so we had no television. And we adopted very much the Steiner kind of, idea that, because we've always been about family, about sitting down at the table and talking and not sitting in front of the television and being engaged with it. I remember I read a quote that it was set in the 1950s with this little girl making a comment. It said, "The stranger arrived one sunny day and it sat in the corner day after day, and the whole family just stopped and listened to it." Day after day. It was introduction of the television.
Yes.
That's what people did. They sat around and watched the corner.
Yeah.
And I guess that made it more, I don't know, it made families more dysfunctional. But a lot of the people that I knew were having really tough times. But because I was still working, to me, it made very little difference because I still engage with people. But when I used to go for a walk, I felt like a leper because everybody would give me this wide berth. And you think, you're outside in the fresh air. I'm not coughing, I'm not sneezing, I'm not talking to you.
Yeah.
And yet it was like, you're a human, there must be something really wrong with you.
Yeah.
So we were taught to stay away from one another.
Yeah.
And now we've got the ramification of how many people are suffering through the psyche and the kids and the socializing. And there doesn't seem to be that cohesion. We've broken it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember reading 1984, and if I thought, if this is what the world is going to be like, shoot me now. Because it was all about the levels of society. Everybody wore uniforms, which we do.
Yeah.
We go to work, we wear a suit or, the high heels, because you must work in corporate, therefore you have to look like this. So the hierarchy of the different colour suits, and they would do the different kind of, tasks. So you had the medial task and, and it escalated, as you can well imagine. But really, that's what we've done. We seem to have lost who we are and our soul.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
To actually get advancement and there seems to be a real disconnect, because when you ask people when they're feeling anxious or they're having a panic attack, where do you feel it in your body? No idea.
Yeah. They haven't been taught how to do it because they have been so very disconnected all these years. Talking about television, I feel television is a fantastic coping mechanism, where you drown out your worries and troubles and stress. And if it's often interesting to ask people the question what type of shows they watch.
Yes.
And that gives you a good idea, a good gauge, and especially if there's someone who really loves the show, or constantly, from one show to the other show on Netflix, they start seeing that pattern. Okay, so what is that pattern really telling you if you're constantly watching, let's say,
murder mysteries,
or comedy, right? Because comedy would be fun, that's good. But what is really missing in your life? Is it that sense of connection? Is it that sense of people around you who can bring a smile to your face? So it now needs to be sought through an electronic avenue of television. So really noticing subtleties in how something like television, which is nothing in my opinion but become a coping mechanism, as I was saying, can tell you a lot about a person.
It can. But when they actually did EEGs on the brain, they found that you're almost in a catatonic state. And so because of where your frequency is, you're much more open to what's coming in and what's being said, right? I find that a lot of the comedy that you were talking about is sarcastic.
Yeah.
Picking on someone or degrading someone or belittling someone, that's not funny.
Yeah.
That's like ripping their soul out, their heart out of them. But we carry this body 24/7. So how can you be so disconnected from it that you don't feel it, that you don't feel like there is, an oppression of the stomach or of the chest, or the stomach is so tight that you don't want to eat. And when you do eat, you feel like evacuating because nothing's going in there. And it shouldn't be a thing that we're taught. It's something that it should be quite innate.
Yeah.
The language that we speak with someone, it should allude to the fact that it has to go back to body.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you go to a doctor and you say, this is what I'm feeling, and they kind of fob you off because it doesn't suit it doesn't fit their paradigm.
Yeah.
And it is so important for us to remember who we are and what we feel and where we feel it, because a lot of the connections that we make when we're younger are part of the body.
Yes. So I find it very interesting when people say that they don't have emotions, because technically when you're not feeling something in your body, it's very much like,
In your head.
I don't feel anything, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel love, I don't feel joy, I don't feel anxiety, or, whatever it be. Even though sometimes people may say, yeah, I have anxiety, but I can't feel it in my body. Or most people, I would like to hope that they do, but I have come across people who say that they don't feel emotions in their body. I've often found it very interesting when I come across people of this nature. I do a body map, and a body map is nothing but a piece of paper, an outline sketch of a body, and you're trying to basically sketch a emotion and where you feel it in the body. So if you ask me, for example, where do I feel love, I just sit with the experience of love, perhaps through a thought or memory, and then I might go, oh, I feel love here, so I'll mark that on the body maps. That gives you a gauge as to where people feel an emotion. And you could also do this with, other emotions like hate, anger. So when someone comes up and says, I don't feel any emotions, I've always found it interesting to ask them the question, okay, how about you mark areas in your body where you don't feel anything? Just flipping it around. Okay, so you don't feel anything. How about you mark areas in your body where you don't feel anything, and maybe just use some squares or circles, and let's have a look. Most people will perhaps, make a circle around the heart, because a lot of people have a lot of issues, in that heart area, right? Where they haven't accepted something, or they're resisting something, or there's grief, there's hate, or there's envy, or there's jealousy, right? So it's a lot in the heart, And after they do that, ask them a question as to what about the other areas? So you marked the heart area, you marked your solar plex area. What about the other areas? What is there? And many people will respond saying pain. Pain.
Really? Yes. Pain of what?
Beautiful. And that is where the work starts.
Right.
So that's where you can explore a little bit more about that pain. What is the pain that is causing a lack of sensation in the body? This is a very gentle process. We can't dive into it because, you don't want people to freeze or the fight or flight experience to kick in all of a sudden, because that is the nature of trauma.
Absolutely.
How the nervous system will react. But going really gently into that pain and exploring it more, exploring it from the soul's perspective. If someone is open to dwelling in that realm, exploring it from a perspective of their own trauma, exploring it from a perspective of their experience.
Yeah, that's really good. Because in Chinese medicine, different organs are very specific in what they do.
Okay.
Like the lung is about grief. The heart is about joy. The liver is about anger. So liver is wood. And like a tree, it likes to be free flow.
Yes.
So therefore, if the liver is in free flow and where it houses the blood, it allows the spirit to have a nice, warm, fluffy bed to go into and fall asleep at night. But you find that a lot of angry people,
Yes.
they're insomniacs.
Yes.
Because anger comes from the liver, and so therefore it can't, go into that restful position. And because wood is anger,
Yes.
and if wood is being a bad parent, it's not going to feed the fire. So if it's not going to feed the fire, it ain't going to find no joy.
Yes.
And so that all the elements, and the kidney's about fear. And so you've got all these interactions, and you've got the father-child, and you've got the father or the mother and grandchild. And so therefore everything affects everything else. So in Chinese medicine, when you have no idea where you start with the earth. Because if the spleen overthinks things, you'll end up with a monkey mind. If you end up with a monkey mind, the stomach can't really do its work because it hasn't got the peace and the quiet. And so, just like a tree, so when your tree isn't great and it's not doing well, you can take it out and actually nourish and nurture and, turn the soil and prepare it. So when you plant the tree, it's got all the right nutrients and love that you've put into it to allow it to start flourishing.
And that's such an interesting thing that you mentioned, because, when you look at holistic counseling or psychotherapy as a whole, imagine if, in society, we had this capacity to not just work on the medical front. If someone is experiencing depression, right, instead of getting medicated straight away, how about go see a psychotherapist or a holistic counselor, someone who can then do work like the body map, and then link to services like potentially acupuncture, anthroposophic medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, wherein you're working on those meridians in combination with the work on the psyche. So there's body work happening, there's psychological work happening, and sooner or later, once people start engaging in the body and psyche, for some reason the spirit always kicks in. But that is for the individual to allow.
Yeah, it's very much so. So do you find that when you've been working with people like these, that once they start to get the mind, body and spirit connection happening, that they actually heal? Or can the journey be shortened by doing it that way? Or do you think it's very much not only to the individual, but the degree that their ailment is, I guess?
I'm an optimist. I like to be an optimist, and everyone should be optimistic about themselves.
I agree.
And that's where, the concept of, talking about the thinking, willing, and feeling capacity, that's where the willing aspect of the soul also kicks in. The desire to get better, because, we live in a society wherein we seek a lot of our validation externally through people. Everything has to be validated, but there's also something called self-validation, and really developing that faculty to self-validate as to what you are doing, taking control, choice and control of your own recovery. That does have a role to play. Now, to answer your question, I have known of clients who, under the system, happen to look at alternative pathways, such as yoga. And through that practice, and this is where the willing function comes into play, gradually moving away from the control system that keeps them on the hamster wheel. And I've seen a change which is very much like the flick of a switch.
Nice.
And people like that, to me, are beyond hope. They are the reason why I enjoy what I do. Now, obviously, this is a situation which never happened through me, but I was closely monitoring and observing this.
Sounds lovely. So do you think that when people come into the system, they believe that they're broken, or that there is more to them than the conversation that you have when they first sit in front of you?
I think it's a blend. Some people, especially with childhood trauma, can come into the system with the sense that they are broken. Very common thing is low self-esteem, and then that snowballs into something else. There are people who do come into the system, but are also, in a way, they say, brainwashed to believe their diagnosis. And when I say brainwashed, I would like to hope that this is not intentional by the professionals involved. But I believe that if you have a child, and if you constantly tell a child something, it becomes a part and parcel of the individual psyche, even when they become an adult. So someone in that vulnerable position, especially if they have a strong inclination to feel validated, because no one's ever validated them in their life, and someone gives them a reason as to why they feel or experience certain things, there is a high probability that the mind is going to gravitate towards that sense of diagnosis, because now, in a way, it's giving me a cognitive meaning towards my experience. Now, that may work for the individual to a certain point, right? But until then.
Yeah, until a Mack truck hits them. I mean, I find that when someone gives someone a diagnosis, they become happy because they reckon they have something to work with. So I had a girlfriend many years ago, and she had fibroids and she was pregnant. And so therefore she read everything about fibroids, what the possibilities are, how we were talking about if this, if that, if the other one. Well, she did exactly that. She ended up having a cesarean, and then, of course, it was all about, she needed assistance because she can't do very much within. In her case, I think it was either 6 or 8 weeks, because it wasn't a horizontal. It was a vertical. So it was the whole, almost from the xiphoid process all the way down. And so therefore, it's like, oh, that feels better. I know what's wrong with me. Now I can fix it. instead of thinking, I don't think there's anything wrong with me. I just need a hand to get clarity
Yes.
of a couple of thoughts that are not congruent for me.
Yeah.
So there seems to be this real disparity in how we've been taught to think as opposed to possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in this day and age wherein, loneliness can also be considered to be an epidemic in the world. When someone is given a diagnosis, especially specific diagnosis like, ADHD or something like that. Everyone's got ADHD these days. It gives...
My daughter told me I've got ADHD, attention deficit disorder. I mean, hey, I've done a lot of things. I don't think I've got ADHD.
Yeah. But I feel like when you combine that cocktail of, loneliness and a lack of connection with a diagnosis, that often fuels a fire, because now what you're having, people becoming tribes and groups on Facebook.
Oh, yes.
Right? Where everyone's got ADHD is in one Facebook group, and there's nothing right or wrong about it, right? It is good to
support groups.
Yes, it is good to a certain extent, but when the so-called supported individual hasn't worked on themselves and starts to support the world around them with the same diagnosis, that is dangerous. There's a fantastic research paper written where there's a concept of the wounded healer. Carl Jung talks about that, and we all are drawn towards healing another because we are wounded ourselves. And hopefully through that process of engaging with another, we can heal. So it's that interconnectedness once again coming into play. But at the same time, there's this fine line between the wounded healer and an impaired professional.
Yeah.
And I don't like the word impaired professional, but this is the word that's used in the research paper.
So is that like transference?
Yes.
That it's that concept.
That's right. Transference, but also at the same time, a lot of projection.
Yes.
In that process wherein, what would you know if you do not have this? Right? Or, we both have the same label on us. So now we can sit together and trauma bond.
Yeah, it's very much like you draw people to you that are at the same frequency as you.
Yeah.
It's that kind of a concept. But it also said, like in AA, the 12 steps, they're brilliant. You follow the steps, and when you do it from a spiritual side of it, because heart has to come into it, you'll come out the other end a completely changed person. Because from anger, you go into forgiveness and acceptance. They say that people that don't change some of the habits, whether it be listening to music, hanging around with the same people, watching the same kind of movies, their likelihood of recovery is zero.
Yeah.
So it's like Bruce Lipton says, that the cells will change according to the environment. And that's all we are. We're just a bunch of cells. But I see that, like when you were in finance, you had regulations. We're in the wellness space. I don't see a difference between any spaces. Engineering was based on regulations. You were based on regulations as part of finance. In the well-being or the healing sector, it's the same. I can understand it so that people aren't preyed on, You do it from heart. You do it with the best intentions of healing or assisting their journey so that they can heal. Because let's face it, we can't do any of that.
Yes.
But we also seem to be trying to help people with like one hand tied behind our back. Do you find that that's the case, that really it's still about KPIs, about making sure that you're doing according to this tunnel that we've been put through?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a realistic worldview of it, right? Because a lot of it also depends on the level of support that the government can provide, right? And if the government is providing funding, that means organizations that are engaging in a lot of these services, like the hospital system and so on, they often end up becoming a revolving door. Because in and out, the more people we have in and out, rather than deeper recovery, and when you're ready, you're out. Right? So I absolutely agree with you on that bit. You can be with one hand tied back, but as a professional in the industry myself, I like to reframe this and inner work wherein you really work on an aspect of yourself or an emotion of yourself has been very helpful for me in navigating that one hand tied behind my back scenario. And a lot of it has to do with, focusing to a greater extent on the ripples rather than focusing on the wave and letting it overwhelm you. The best thing that I can do in this moment, for example, right now, talking to you, I'm not sure how many people are going to listen to this podcast, but nevertheless, it is a ripple. And out of 10 people, if one person picks up something, that is good.
I agree.
And hopefully there are multiple people like me, like yourself, creating these ripples.
Yes.
So we have a new wave.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the idea for me is to open up so that people can see and experience different ways of thinking, so that they start to engage with their own mind and body, and knowing that they're not just what they can see and what they can touch. I mean, quantum physics definitely lead us down that path. So therefore, we can change the energy of another just by looking at them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's this empirical research done wherein they actually prove that if you look at the back of someone's head, keep staring at it, likelihood is that they turn back and they'll look at you.
Absolutely.
Now, how does that happen, right?
It's almost like someone's tapping you from a distance.
How does that happen? How many times has it happened that you think of someone and they give you a call?
Absolutely.
I was talking to you earlier about my partner, and she'd been to this chapel at Sedona. And my mom's a Catholic, a very devout Catholic, and this chapel happens to be a Catholic chapel. And I was just having a look online, and I was just like, oh my God, my mom would have loved, like a scapular or perhaps a candle from this place. And guess what? She sends me a message. Hey, Phil, you know what? I think your mom would have loved something from this place. And I was thinking the same thing. I never told her.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. I told her not to get anything for her. But nevertheless, I won't be surprised now she does. So, Sedona.
Yes, it's not round the corner.
Not
from
round
Melbourne
the corner.
to Sedona, it's
That's
a
right.
lot of distance.
What's happening?
Oh, I absolutely agree.
And I taught this to myself. I never even vocalized it. There was this background sense as I was browsing the website, right at the back of my mind. I was like, oh, Mama will like this shit.
Oh, absolutely. I have, same kind of synchronicities, and you think, like, it's someone up there having a good old laugh for us down here. Because, I remember it would have been about 10 years that I hadn't seen this lady. and we did a course together. And then I'm picking someone up from the airport. No, I'm dropping someone off at the airport and she's picking someone up at the airport. We met in International. And it's like this synchronicity doesn't just happen out of nothingness, which makes it really interesting.
There's some synchronicity happening right here as you're telling me that story, because when I dropped Jules at the airport, on the way back, obviously I was looking out for an Uber to go back home by myself because I never drove because it was raining and I couldn't be bothered parking at the airport. I find my regular cab driver right outside Terminal 2 honking at me, waving. Initially, I don't pay attention. Then I realize, oh my God, it's him. And I go up to him and I say, hey, what are you doing here? He's like, just dropping a customer. Do you want to come along? You gave me a free ride back home.
Oh, that's amazing. Phillip, it's been a very interesting journey that we have traversed through so many different things. Thank you so much for taking down these rabbit holes that we have gone through today. But if you had to leave someone with a message, what would you tell them, or how would they know that the current path that they're on is not serving them?
Well, firstly, path is made by walking.
Yes, but it can be really trodden.
Yeah. And if their current path is not working for them, we live in a day and age where you don't have to be alone. You can seek support. And sometimes that guidance is necessary. So always remember that you're not alone in your journey. And being vulnerable to reach out to another fellow human being is okay. And it is normal.
Yeah, I agree. But how do you know who that person is? Would you say it's a sense feeling? It's because you can reach out to all sorts of people.
Yep.
And some people will say one thing to your face and then they'll mock you in the background as if, hey, did you know?
Yeah.
So how do they start? Where do they go?
That's a good way of that is to recognize that someone who makes you feel good about yourself is a good start. Not to say that there aren't tricksters around and people will fake validate you. But that's the part and parcel of life. Unfortunately, there is no magic bullet. It's like expecting a magic pill from the medical system. Well, cognitively, it's important for people to do their homework because, as we were talking earlier about, in the space, sometimes you can find a lot of charlatans. Really making sure that when you meet someone, asking questions, you being curious about the other will give you a lot of information as to whether or not you can work with them.
That's very true. We forget though, but that's a very good reminder. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatriz. It's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful, actually. So we're signing off as, what's life about if not a change?